Hello and welcome to episode 43 of Off the Bandstand. My name is Christian Wiggs. I am your host. Being that Tuesday was National Teacher Appreciation Day, we wanted to do something special. So today's episode is Brian Casey, a man whose mentorship shaped the trajectory of my musical career. Brian taught for 31 years at Brazoswood High School, my alma mater, and among countless other honors, led the symphonic band to becoming the 2013 Texas Music Educators Association All-State Honor Band and earned the 2017 Sudler Flag of Honor awarded by the John Philip Sousa organization. Brian retired in 2017, but in a shock to almost no one, came out of retirement the following year to become the conductor of the Brazosport Symphony Orchestra. So in this episode, we talk about the evolution of jazz education. We also talk about managing family and marriage expectations with a profession that far exceeds conventional work hours, and the telltale sign that you need rest when the notes on the page begin to move. So moving on to the releases of the week, the first one comes from a band in Chicago called Typical Sisters, and this is their first single called Well Done off of their third record that's coming up called Love Beam. This group is an instrumental trio from Chicago that draws upon jazz, 90s post-rock, krautrock, and the classic ECM albums of the 70s, and the band's second record was praised by the New York Times with saying, quote, "They have something increasingly rare today, group exploration with little flexing or hurry." So this band features guitarist Gregory Ullman, bassist Clark Summers, and drummer Matt Carroll. And again, this third album called Love Beam is releasing on July the 9th of this year. So if you want to support this release and go and pre-order it, you can go over to typicalsisters.bandcamp.com where you can get a digital copy, you can pre-order a CD like I did yesterday, or you can get, if you're feeling the nostalgia factor, a cassette, all for very affordable prices where you are supporting the musicians directly and helping to have them make more music like this in the future. So also, if you want to follow everything they're doing on Instagram on a daily basis, you can go over to their handle at Typical Sisters Band. And then now moving over to the second release of the week, it's Elias Haslinger's third album under the group name Church on Monday. It's called For Being There, and it released in 2019. This is the third album from the award-winning group, and that group garnered the title of Best Jazz Band from the Austin Chronicle in 2012 and was featured by Downbeat magazine in June of 2013. This album features Elias Haslinger, Dr. James Polk, Daniel Durham, Tommy Howard, and Scott Lanningham, and the band held an 8-year residency at the Continental Club Gallery down on South Congress that is a staple venue in town, and they just announced that I believe on May 28th they are going to be back and the venue is going to be opening back up. So if you want to catch Church on Monday for yourself, every single Monday night, you can come down to the Continental Club Gallery and we'll have more information about that very, very soon. So now, if you want to get a physical copy of this album, you can go over to elijazz.com or go to Bandcamp, where it's eliashaslinger.bandcamp.com, that also has all of his other albums as well as on his website. And then if you want to follow Elias and the group on a daily basis, again, you can go over to their Instagram handle at Elias Haslinger Music. So now moving on to the Monk shows of the week. The first one that we want to plug is tonight at 7:30. It's the Greg Clifford Quartet. That's May the 6th. And Greg is one of the most diverse and one of the best drummers in town. I'm going to be tuning in. I hope you will as well. The second one that we want to plug is Pamela Hart's Happy Talk album release show, CD release show, that is going to be tomorrow, Friday, May the 7th. This was previously last Saturday, but it was moved. So if you were like, oh man, I missed it, you have your chance to actually come to the show. They have seats for a limited live studio audience, as are most of the Monk shows now, and you can go over to monksjazz.com to secure your seat for yourself and your group of up to 4. They have 2-seat tables and 4-seat tables. And then the last one that we want to plug of this week also has a live limited studio audience, and it is the next installment of the Austin Jazz Society Project Safety Net series. It's going to be on Tuesday, May the 11th, and it's the Mitch Watkins Quartet. So tune into all of those shows. Of course, they are all free to live stream and they are affordable to go in person. But as always, you should support the band by donating. They will have their Venmo, Cash App, and PayPal links up in the corner of the screen, and all donations are appreciated. So now that is it for all of the Monk shows and all the releases of the week. To all of you teachers out there, thank you so much for what you're doing and for investing investing in the next generation of musicians, artists, creative, mathematicians, all of the above. And thank you so much for your work. Happy National Teacher Appreciation Day, week, and month. And for now, sit back, relax, and enjoy episode 43, Brian Casey. This is Off the Bandstand. I don't know that much about like how you got into music, which feels shameful, but at the same time, it's like understandable. So please, like, tell me about coming up in College Station and when music first made its way into your view.
My dad was one of the first psychology professors at A&M. He and 5 other professors started the psychology program at Texas A&M, and so. He was a single income earner, which a lot of dads were back then. And so he was also kind of an audiophile, you know, I mean, it was turntables and records back then. And he dropped a lot of money on a really nice acoustic research, top of the line stereo system. And my dad, I think his first love was music, and there was music playing in our house all the time, and it sounded great. And I can still, I'm going back to our living room, just sitting in this yellow plaid chair with these speakers in the corners and just blasting out Mahler or Verdi or, it could have been anything. But my mom liked kind of pop and jazz, and her favorite was the Carpenters. And so to this day, I think the Carpenters are just amazing. And Eric Harper always gave me a hard time about that, but I'm man enough to admit that I love the Carpenters.
I love the Carpenters too, man. Like, what's wrong with Karen Carpenter? You know,
nothing, not a thing. And my dad knew more about classical music he forgot more about classical music than I'll ever know. And I always felt inadequate coming home from studying music at Sam Houston State, and he could talk me under the table when it came time to talk about opera or symphonies. So he, my mom and dad had a lot to do with me loving music. And all of my friends, their parents were also involved with the university, and they all went into chemical engineering or some kind of engineering. But
sure,
I had the music bug pretty hard. I was a hotshot trumpet player. I could play kind of high. I was really starting to dig jazz, and I thought that's really where I was going. I just wanted to play trumpet, and I discovered Maynard Ferguson and Doc Severinsen, and boy, I was just on fire for trumpet, and kind of starting to practice a little bit. And so I went to Sam Houston. My main attractions there were Dave Caffey was doing the jazz program, and Tom Perry, I was teaching trumpet, and I thought, man, those guys are amazing. And I had such a great, like a lot of people that go into music, I just had great high school band directors, Bill Atkins and Ralph Trout. Really, they both went to Sam Houston too, and so they kind of steered me that direction. And Ralph even drove me over for my audition. So yeah. I owe Ralph a lot. He really, kicked my butt and got me going on trumpet. But I auditioned, went to Sam Houston, and found out there were a lot of really good trumpet players, and that was just at that one school. And so I started thinking, maybe this is a little more competitive than I thought. I mean, I was a hot shot trumpet player in College Station, Texas, and at A&M Consolidated High School. But at a music school, and I just noticed that there were a lot of guys just really digging into the Clark book and just practicing a lot. And I discovered I was a little more mediocre than I thought I was going in. And I really enjoyed it. I loved getting better, but I started thinking, I'm not sure that I can play trumpet for a living, and especially seeing guys go out and audition. So I started private teaching a little bit and started kind of helping out a couple of small local programs, and kind of got the teaching bug a little bit, and decided that, that might be a good way to go. So anyway, I was teaching a drum major camp one summer after my 5th year of college, and Jim Cook had a hard time. It was before cell phones. Jim Cook was having a hard time getting a hold of me, but he had called Sam Houston and said, "Hey, we're looking for like a high brass guy, maybe somebody that speaks jazz." And Rod Cannon at Sam Houston said, "I've got just the guy for you." So anyway, Jim Cook and I hit it off just so beautifully from day one, and ended up teaching together for 25 years at darn near.
Whoa.
So anyway, I taught with Bill Gottschalk and Jim Cook at Brazosport for 6 years, and kind of started thinking, that those guys weren't going to go anywhere. And, doing the third band, our program was a little smaller in numbers back then. And I was getting a little bit discouraged as far as just the level of music I was able to do. And
Sure.
so I decided to go to the University of Miami, and I studied with Alfred Reed and did the music industry program.
Okay.
Anyway, continued to study bass. I was kind of moving towards bass and away from trumpet a little bit, and played with a really good country and cover band at Sam. And I think I learned more doing that. Well, not more, but as much doing that. It trained my ears really well. And it allowed me to learn and to be versatile, and
Right.
not turn my nose up at any kind of music, And I learned to appreciate country and classic rock and all that. And so Miami was great. But I graduated at the end of that and just was unemployed.
Yeah, sure.
Interned in Nashville, and I thought I was kind of going to end up there, but the window kind of closed there. And so I called Jim Cook, and he said, come on back and be the first assistant. And then I was able to be head director for a few years. And so that's kind of a long story, but that's kind of the way it all happened.
So I would say that's the short version of it, because that's a lot of ground to cover. Well, man, so in the music industry side of things, generally what we see, well, I won't say that. I'll say that generally what I think is like music industry kind of moves a little bit away from the playing side and goes a little bit more into the managerial side. Is that something that you were just as passionate about as you were about playing your horn, or did you just think, oh, this is a cool way to kind of get involved in the scene of like all of these kind of people like Karen Carpenter,
I think one of my strengths and one of my gifts is my ears, and I wanted to use my ears. And so at Arista, I was able to help out with the artisan repertoire. And my boss actually hurt his back really bad and had to work from home, but this was before Zoom and stuff, you know. So anyway, I got kind of thrust into a position of pretty high responsibility for a while, and it was just on the cusp of digital, so DAT tapes were just a lot of music was boiled down to DAT, digital audio tape, these little bitty cassette things. And so one of my jobs was to go and proof mixes and to go and just listen through and make sure there was no digital error or dropout or anything. And then I listened to, artists and tried to help put, rep with artists and tried to, like when I first got there, Asleep at the Wheel was looking for a couple of things that weren't Texas swing.
Sure.
They wrote a lot of their own Texas swing, but they were looking for kind of maybe something novelty or something kind of just quirky or different. So it was fascinating to go to publishers and just listen to music all day and try to just listen for that perfect, piece for the style of the artist. And so to me, that was really satisfying and really a lot of fun. And I'm not happy unless I'm like you, I'm not happy unless there's music going on in some way in my life, So,
right.
It was really a dream job, and I loved it so much. And then, occasionally somebody famous, I was sitting at a typewriter one day, and guy came over and put his hand on my shoulder and introduced himself. It was Steve Wariner, So, every once in a while something, I hung out for a day with Brooks and Dunn, and found out how hilarious they are. And this was right at the beginning when they were first, starting to hit. So that was really, really fun. All along, though, I kind of miss teaching.
Really? Okay.
I've just always had this, and I found ways to teach. I taught in a music store, which is the way it's done in Miami. The music stores have little studios in the back, and so my studio was right across the hall from the Mavericks drummer, and so that was a little challenging sometimes as a trumpet teacher, but he was great. Anyway, it was I always kind of had this nagging feeling like that God kind of was steering me towards teaching, and he was letting me have this little 2 years to kind of figure it out, and then just kind of affirm my path into the teaching field.
Yeah, it's really fascinating to me too, the thing that a lot of teachers have to say, and without pigeonholing this next question, I'm curious, you said whenever you got to Sam Houston, you were like, okay, now it's less of a big fish, little pond, small fish, big sea type situation. And this is just like a small nugget kind of leading up to kind of a very macro example of this. But a lot of teachers say, and I will even attest to the fact that I started teaching very early on. Whenever I've told this story on the podcast before, but at Curious Chords and Kyle, Zach Thibodeau recommended me to replace him, and they brought me in for an interview. And the whole time I was like, "Don't give me this job. I'm not ready for this." But through that, because they accompanying students, I could play root position triads, and not with any sort of fun rhythmic integrity, just kind of where I got this saying from is you park and bark. It was just boom, play, But I noticed that through teaching, not only on piano, but if I was teaching voice students or trumpet students, all of that having to teach really reinforced a lot of good playing habits, and I feel like made me a better player. And the whole I know it's the whole trope, but I think it's so true, is that you learn from your students and it'll totally make you better. So I'm curious if that during your Sam Houston years teaching on the side started to reinforce your playing and make you a better player.
There's no doubt about it. Yeah. And I think you have to be careful about that too, because if you're playing your trumpet alongside a player with less experience, and you're doing that all day, if you're not careful, you can start to kind of imitate their tuning tendencies, so you have to, but it does definitely make you think about a little bit more about the physical part of things. And
there's a thought that I just had that I was like, oh my gosh, I was thinking about this the other day, but I didn't have anybody to tell it to that I felt would understand immediately, did you ever do something in teaching, whether at any point in your career, where a student would make a sound and you'd bring the horn to your lips and you'd try to modify your embouchure or whatever with the more poor techniques or whatever to recreate that sound, so that way you could meet them where they were at and then come over? Because sometimes people go, oh no, you just need to have taller. But I like to try to, not to the detriment, obviously, if they're pushing too hard, I don't want to recreate in that way. But I would if it was a more spread sound and it was just kind of, it felt very cloudy, I'll try to recreate that sound. I'll be like, oh yeah, you're doing this, and I feel like this is where your tongue is in your mouth or whatever, and then you need to lift because yada yada yada. I'm making up a total hypothetical situation. But did you ever try to do that, or was it always just no, I'm going to try to just kind of guess where they're at?
Oh no, definitely, yeah. And I think I think there's a beauty into literally trying to do it wrong and kind of embrace the feeling of that, and then move it towards improving it. The brain is a funny thing, and one thing that really revolutionized my teaching was the talent code by Daniel Coyle. Okay. Coyle, the talent code. It just talks about the brain mapping and the neurological side of what we do, and it really changed the way I practice. And I know a lot of pros, they'll take a passage of music and practice it in every conceivable way. We'll take Bobby Wazell, for instance, my good friend, now the dean of music at Kansas, phenomenal clarinet player, but he would take something, a 16th note passage, and practice it in every way you can think of besides straight 16ths, swing it, or tongue 2 notes per note, or play it backwards, or and that kind of thing really, to practice it intentionally wrong somehow cements it into our neural pathways, and it enables us to do it correctly.
not only that, I feel like it enforces the idea of being versatile to a lot of different styles and having your ear acclimated to all of those different possibilities, right? Because then a lot of people will try to play something and they get it wrong, but they don't realize that they got it wrong, and the teacher will have to be like, no, it's like this, and then try to break it down in smaller terms of like, oh no, like the thing of like, oh, you're tonguing twice in a row. But if you have that ability to play it all these different kinds of ways, you can kind of start attributing it to, and this is kind of a generalization, but you can start to attribute it to different genres and stuff like that, and be like, oh no, that's not fitting, and this is why it doesn't sound right, because it feels like everything's in this one font, everything's Times New Roman, and then this is in like Calibri or whatever. So anyways, thank you for indulging me on my tangent. I appreciate it. Well, I have to ask too, I just thought about this. I was like, I make minimal notes of just things that I don't want to forget to say. And as I was like going through, I was like, man, what else do I want to write down? And I was like, there's no way I'm not going to mention this. Where did the photo come from of you looking off camera into a mirror with the comb, with your mouth kind of like open? Do you know which photo I'm talking about?
Yes, I don't know. I don't even remember, to tell you the truth, but okay. I know the photo, and I wish there was a way to sponge that from the.
I can cut this part out if you want, but I just love that photo so much. Like every time, I remember it would be like, not that the music was not the highlight, but just like coming into your office every time for like region band, like one-on-ones, I would always be like, yes, there's the photo, like made my day. Like, but in the way that it was so hip though. And you got to imagine, like, for students who view like authority figures as like, oh, the parents don't, again, you were totally fun, but like parents don't have fun or whatever, and just seeing that, it was like, oh, we can relate to this, because it's like, it's fun, it's silly, it's just like, it's just hip, and it was just, there's a reason why it stuck in my mind. And I think it was just very much to the fun nature of just you as a human being, and how you instill that love for all things. So,
well, thank you. I was proud that we really tried to keep up with where the teenagers were, and what they were listening to and what they were watching, and where, kind of make sure that we're in touch with their world, and not just insist that they're in touch with ours. And so, it blew everybody away when we choreographed a little bit of Soulja Boy into one of our shows, into our rain marching show. It just the kids were blown away that we even knew what that was, and then the fact that they were going to actually imitate a few steps of it during the lightning bolts in rain. It blew them away. And I was just like to mix in some analogies, like I think we said, you want to play this with the spirit of like just the exuberance of Honey Boo Boo sucking on a stick of butter or something. I don't know, just goofy, stupid things like that. But they remembered that, and so I think just knowing that the kids knowing that we were interested about their cultural interests, I think it really made a difference.
Oh, it absolutely does.
It's fun for us too, kept things current. I think if you taught algebra, it's kind of hard to find goofy and fun analogies. I mean, it's going to be the same exactly every year, sure. But we're blessed with having different music and just different ways and different contexts to describe it and explore it.
Yeah, the landscape's always changing, right? And talking about the landscape changing, something that I also have been thinking about that really is, we kind of take it for granted, especially the people my age, but we don't realize how young jazz education is. We realize that like jazz, it seems like a long time ago, we're like, oh yeah, in the very late 1800s, early 1900s, jazz started to come on the scene. And I think we're like, oh, it was, 120, 130 years ago. Okay, great. But jazz education, and I couldn't even put like a year on it, I feel like did not start to become in the mainstream on the local level, national level, global level until probably around the 80s. But again, you could be the person to correct me on this. So how did you see, because you were interested in Doc Severinsen and Maynard Ferguson and all these different people, how did you start to see the jazz education landscape start to change over the course of either being in college, or if it was after that, in the public schooling system?
Really, jazz education really kicked into gear after World War II. Like in World War II, the armed forces were the biggest employer of musicians, and then jazz was becoming really big with Glenn Miller and the big bands, and so I think it was the late 40s that North Texas started their jazz education program, and so I think and then arranging and writing for big band in music that was kind of beyond and outside of the dance, the dance forms. It just became more and more popular. And then, in the 60s and 70s, when my high school teachers were studying, things became exciting with Stan Kenton and, and even the established big bands were, exploring different styles, and Latin was starting to come in. But so I think I was in high school during just the golden age of that. The 70s was a really exciting time. So it seems to me that we've seen student jazz just ever increase in popularity, and professional jazz become a little more difficult all the time, as you've seen for yourself, even in the 2020s, it's just harder and harder to make a living as a jazz musician. Now, jazz musicians are becoming really smart about, a lot of guys I know play at a mega church, or they play like they double on woodwinds, and so they're on the musical scene, or they play in the theaters, or that kind of thing. So they've learned how to become diverse and country. I'm doing some of that myself, and so I think. And we may have kind of done ourselves in with the jazz scene, in that, in the jazz clubs, it's a lot of what you hear is so sophisticated that only a jazz musician can relate to it and understand it. And I know my mom, she liked something that was tuneful that she could relate to, that perhaps that you could always really understand the structure. That it wasn't going too far outside, but I think for a lot of people that are not really educated and don't have a trained ear, a lot that you're going to hear in a jazz club is just a little beyond them, so it's kind of evolved into a and even big band stuff, there are a lot of great big band compositions that only a musician is going to really appreciate.
Sure. Yeah. One that I think strikes a balance a little bit of, and I can't say this from an objective point of view because I am biased, and I love it, and it hooked me the first time I heard it. But I feel like one that is more sophisticated but still instills the excitement in any layman listening to it is stuff like that Bob Cornell, The First Circle arrangement, right? Like, I remember not knowing jack about mixed meter stuff and trying to clap along with PM as I was like watching them rehearse and being like, I don't understand what's happening. Like, I think I know the pattern, but I don't, but also, I think you're right that sometimes it can be very, very heady, and there's certainly people on both sides of the argument there where it's like, but we need to challenge our listeners. But at the same time, it's like, but how are you going to challenge listeners if there aren't listeners there to listen in the first place? Right. So it's all these kind of like varying degrees of things of like, and that's evident too in the venues that you play, because it's like, I just put together this thing together this thing to commemorate the 30th anniversary of the Elephant Room. And I conducted a lot of these interviews, and, a lot of people would say, the Elephant Room was really nice because after a night of playing a steakhouse gig or whatever, where we kind of have to do like the wallpaper thing, we could really stretch our legs, and there was nothing that was really off limits about the Elephant Room. And it kind of has that built-in crowd where people are like, I'll say this, like, Elephant Room is kind of a dive bar, like, to a certain extent. It's a jazz club, but it's also, very conversational. It's not necessarily a listening room, and everything has its own place. But at the Elephant Room, you can kind of stretch your legs a little bit more. But again, there's other people who say, Branford Marsalis has said in the past, like, if you're trying to get on stage and just blow like the most like complicated licks, you know, and you're not just trying to communicate like the music itself, and I'm paraphrasing him, I would not dare to direct quote Branford Marsalis, but, you know, off the cuff without a script. But yeah, he, you know, really kind of drives that point home of like, you have to be accessible to your audiences. And it would not be an Off the Bandstand episode, and I would be remiss if I didn't say that the guy who does that so well, in my opinion, you know, we saw him with the Smithsonian Masterworks Orchestra, but seeing Kurt in a club setting, I mean, he's got everybody right here in the palm of his hand. And he's doing, you know, like most recently when I saw him in January before the pandemic, he did this really long vocalese on Speak No Evil. And it was like, it was a lot. And like, even for the listeners, I think it could have maybe alienated a few of them because it was like 10 minutes, but it was still great. And people were willing to go on that ride with him because he had kind of satisfied all of the urges of like previously and after that tune during that set of like, I'm going to bring you in and you're going to be a full part of this experience. And it's not, you know, performer artifice and then just like who's ever out there. It's a very communal experience. But I think that is a really great example of kind of challenging your audience to a certain extent of being like, all right, I'll give you like the things that are really easy listening and play a Joe Jackson tune, but now let's dive into, you know, the vastness of Wayne Shorter. So yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I'm really proud of, first of all, I'm really happy that Cezanne is coming back to Houston. You know, it's going to reopen in a different location, but Cezanne is a listening room, and you know, you get chewed out for you know, talking through the playing there. But you know, in a lot of cases, virtuosic players and very accomplished players, but they kind of keep it inside enough to you know, there's plenty of room inside to create beauty and create great music. So yeah. But I'm also excited about the direction of jazz education in Texas. I think there are a lot of just great high school programs still going, and the college programs. I mean, North Texas has always been great, but the many colleges are you know, adding jazz bands to their lineup, and the jazz festivals are alive and well. They're going to rebound strong next year, I'm sure. And you know, jazz is just such a great way to, big band jazz is a great way to teach a number of students at once. You know, I'm honored to be doing the Brazosport College Summer Jazz Band this year. And I think we'll probably have more than 5 saxophone players, but, you know, that's okay. We'll, you know, double some parts, and we'll make it work, you know, like Richard Burke always does out there, just make it work. But it's a way to get it to a lot of people. And you know, for high school kids, it's their first time to really be on their own part by themselves, and it may be their first time to play extended chords and to hear those sounds. So I'm really and you know, frankly, our top graduates, or our graduates that knew the most about music, came through our jazz program because we were able to tie in more music theory and that kind of thing, and even composition, sometimes improvisation. So, you know, I think it's an invaluable experience, and for a lot of kids, you know, I'm thinking about Joseph Trahan, who just finished his tenure with the 1 o'clock and is on his way to Indiana now. So we're really proud of Joseph. But it was a chance for him to kind of start exploring his doubles a little bit, and then learn some of the other woodwinds. So. You talked about First Circle. You know, I think the first time some of those saxophone players had picked up a flute in their life was on that piece. So, you know, it's just opens so many opportunities. So I hope we can keep jazz alive and well in Texas, and I think throughout the country, you know, you hear these groups that are participating in essentially Ellington and the Smithsonian Jazz. I mean, there's just some killing programs, and it's hard to believe that 16-year-olds are improvising with that kind of authority and confidence and, you know, brain power. So it's really great that America's indigenous art form is going so strong.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of directly going into that of, you know, you've been more than a fly on the wall. You've been directly involved in the success of these people, talking about the robust, like I sent you that last night, like we'll talk about the robust arts community, but, it's very interesting for local communities to watch and see the evolution of, creatives and artists, but as people, and all of their, mischievous deeds as children, but then also all of their achievements as well. And so, kind of talking about people like Manuel Santos, right? With Icarus, talking about Robert Ellis, being the future of, folk and Americana right now. Talking about like Zach Thibodeau, like excelling, like all these different people, Ryan Lindveit, Matt Ingebretson, like, right, he has a show on Comedy Central, and one other person, like I wrote down, and of course there's so many more, but like Scott Strong too, like there's so many people. And then for that matter, like Nathaniel McKay, right, being in the Air Force Band. There's so many people who have just gone on to be thriving in the arts community. But I'm so curious from your perspective, where you've kind of seen them feed through the younger schools and then come through high school and really start to see them blossom. John Claytor, right, who was blowing us all away, and the Claytor family in general. What was that like? And did you ever have anybody who, and this is not a gotcha question, but what was that like? And did you ever have anybody who kind of took you by surprise that was like, oh, whoa, like maybe later in the game? I'm thinking specifically Ben Edquist, and I don't think that he would be offended by me saying that, because he's like one of the best bass baritones I've ever heard now. But look, we didn't know that whenever he was doing High School Musical, production. So anyways, I'll stop yapping and let you talk.
I think the biggest surprise, well, first of all, we tried to encourage all kids to continue music, no matter what their profession. Too many players end up just reaching this high level of proficiency and then putting their instrument in the case and just going on and studying whatever. But I think music in college is a great way to step into a family, just like you do at the beginning of your high school career. And I'm really happy to do these community groups. I think for some of these chemical engineers, the highlight of their week is walking in with their viola and sitting down and making music with people. And I regardless of whether folks want to make the majority of their living playing, everybody needs to keep music in their life.
Yeah.
But Emily Newton is the biggest phenomenon, I think. Emily she just wanted to play Barry sax, and she discovered jazz and really was an accomplished player. And Emily marched with her freshman year with a Barry sax, and was really into it. And she went to North Texas and got into the jazz thing, and then discovered that she got into a jazz vocal ensemble and discovered that she could sing. And that one thing led to another, and she discovered opera, and now she's an opera star.
Wow.
And she was Anna Nicole Smith in the opera that depicted her, but she's become just super amazing. Adriana Zabala is another one. We called her Jenny back in the day. She was a percussionist, and I can still hear her playing the xylophone solo on tuned brake drums in the pit, and she was an accomplished percussionist, but she discovered that she could sing and ended up singing with the Houston Symphony Chorale her senior year in high school, and now she's teaching at Yale, and amazing. I know Melanie Price ended up, she was a trumpet player, but ended up playing in a professional handbell choir. So I always thought of you as a trumpet player until, like your junior or senior year, where you started discovering Michael Bublé and Kurt Elling, and discovering that you had a calling and a voice and a gift for that. So you never know, but I think anyway, I hope that helps.
No. I mean, it's fascinating to me, the idea of watching the evolution of people, right? I feel that way about, my students who, I'm not old enough and they're not old enough yet to have been like out of high school and going into these big things with music, although I have had students who have, gotten scholarships, great scholarships to universities and such. But I just think that has to be so crazy. And the trope is like, oh, I knew them when, like that whole saying, but like really, like, more than that of like the talking point, I think it's just so fascinating to think about, like, oh yeah, like I caught this person, goofing off on the bus when they shouldn't have been or whatever. Or maybe we were all supposed to be in the stands watching other bands, and, they were behind the what's it called? The load crew bus, grilling fajitas or whatever, like, and dripping grease on the parking lot. Now we have to answer for that, man, load crew was a fun time, but we won't go into all those stories. But yeah, anyways, that's really just the main thing, is just whatever you had to offer about that. Cause it's so interesting to me.
Absolutely. I think of Brad Clymer. Brad was always a colorful personality, and I had to lean on him a couple times. We're great friends now, but Brad's a great jazz trumpet player, and he's I think last I heard, he was walking dogs by day, walking dogs of the stars in New York, and then he gets to play at night quite a bit. And anyway, it's definitely and sometimes the most gifted artistically and musically people have the most colorful personalities,
Sure.
and sometimes not super easy to deal with. But no, Brad was great and still is. And and every once in a while somebody comes along that you just know is headed for greatness at the highest level. Kelton
Mm-hmm.
Cook is one. We just knew that Kelton was special and really dedicated to it, and now is performing with the Vienna Philharmonic.
Yeah.
So you just have somebody that's just super focused and has the gift, and just is really smart about practicing and really committed to just studying with as many people and getting as much information as they can. And you have to be a little fearless too, just ice water in your veins when it comes in terms of performing in front of people, and that's a skill too that you have to practice. But Kelton, Nathan Claytor's another one. John Claytor, of course, and the famous Claytor family. Brian Jones was one of the first students I encountered at Brazoswood, and we just knew. I mean, Brian was he was the top player on every instrument in the ensemble. He could pick up anything and make music on it. But it's really special when somebody like that comes along too, and they tend to bring people along with them and create a legacy.
Yeah, for sure. Well, talking about commitment is, I wrote down that it feels kind of like a unicorn situation to find two absolutely prolific, praised because they are just doing it at the utmost level, two educators that are married, because it's like, that's the ultimate power couple. But in the same way, it also, is totally makes sense, because it's like, oh yeah, excellence is drawn to excellence, and those kind of very dedicated, very intentional personalities are going to be drawn to one another most oftentimes. So, with Beth doing the choir thing, I should say Mrs. Casey, and you doing the band thing, and those are both two jobs that require more than the conventional work hours of the day, to put it in a very mild sense, right? Even if you don't have, specific things that you're like, oh, I have to get this done because I have to give this to this person, or like lesson plans or whatever, which lesson plans kill creativity. But anyways, that's another conversation entirely. Right. But, the idea of you never get to turn your brain off, even as you're thinking about one marching show, you're probably thinking about the next one, or like whatever ideas the composer is like, hey, what if we did this year? Or what if we saved this idea? Or concert band season, what are we going to do for this? UIL, it's a never ending kind of, a rotation of stress, but stress that we like to take on. Right. So in the sense of being married and both working at the high school level, and having two very demanding jobs, I'm sure lots of young educators who are either dating with the intention to marry, are currently engaged, or have just gotten married would like to know, how do you strike that balance of being a support system for one another, but being so drained by your program that I'm sure it's hard to find that energy, whenever you come home?
That's a great question, and it concerns me these days, especially with the monster we've created with marching band. I don't know how it would be possible for two high school band directors to be married to each other. I think of the Montoyas, Martin Risa Montoya. How do they do it? I have no idea. We've it's gotten away from us just a little bit, I think, especially in the marching band arena. But Beth and I had to be very intentional about marriage insurance. We had to we would try to schedule once a month a splurge, where we would just go out and spend an irresponsible amount of money on a meal and make sure, fortunately we had an army of teenagers as babysitters, so there was never a shortage of babysitters, but we would really work hard to make sure that we had some quality time with each other. And, once we had kids, we were really intentional about spending our vacation time wisely. Like we would try to hit the ski slopes or, hit the fishing trips or make sure we got out of town and got away and hit the pause button. But I think it's you've got to do that because the workaholism can kind of take over if you're not careful. And it's you never get to the end of the list. You just never. It's going to be there. And my friend Bill Poland, who was the baseball coach at Brazoswood for years and years, he just passed away. He was a great man, but we ate lunch together for a couple years every day. And Bill would always say, "Do your best and leave the rest." And that just became our. We just had to live by that because you can make yourself crazy just trying to get it all done. Yeah. We also tried to include our kids as much as possible. Like I remember marching a parade with clay on my shoulders one time, and I think we even pushed Sean in a baby stroller one time in a parade. But they got to come. They've been to Disney more times than just about anybody. And another thing, I think they had good role models. Like we would bring them up to the band hall and let them run around for an hour while we did a sectional, and they were surrounded by band kids, or choir kids, and just achieving kids, and they were able to walk over and rock out on a drum set or hang out with. Listen to a jam session, with somebody like you or, just hang out with some really good people. And so I think although we were busy and sometimes pretty strung out and sometimes, there were days where we really didn't get to see our kids very much or see each other very much. There was always that Sunday afternoon where we could go out and then pull it back together. And so I'm proud of how we were able to balance it. But I do pray for young families that are involved in this business because it can eat you up,
Yeah, the whole thing of do your best and leave the rest. At what point did it hit where you were like, all right, you know what, I'm turning off work for today, and I'm just leaving that till tomorrow morning? Because there are lots of times where, I think in a way, obviously there's so much, grief and lots of terrible things that have come out of the pandemic. But in a way, I'm trying to, this past year, really focusing a lot on meditating and trying to do, a lot of, be very mindful and do a lot of mindfulness and just kind of, walking outside, noticing the smell of the jasmine that's, on the wall, a patch that's on the wall outside our complex. And I would say that the pandemic has been the best year for Lydia and I's relationship because we have had a lot of time to, you're living together, you're stuck inside, you got to, make sure that you live together well. But we've been, it's been the strongest that it has been. And I think it's because I've really been forced to take a step back from work and redirect it towards stuff like this. But it's not like, I get home from a gig and it's 11 p.m. and now I'm trying to research all the new venues in town that I haven't seen yet because I'm trying to book more gigs. And it's just this kind of never ending thing where it literally is not going to end, the search for more gigs, because it's month by month. And to a certain extent, you need that hustle. But at the same time, it can be super debilitating and it's just going to suck the life out of it. And you just become like a workhorse. So at what point, in both of your careers, did you hit it together? Did you hit it separately where you were like, you know what? Shut the laptop. That's it. I'll deal with it at 5:45 in the morning when I wake up the next day.
One of my inspirations was Wade McDonald. I remember him saying, at 6 o'clock, we shut the doors. And if it doesn't get done that day, it doesn't get done. And that the rest of the time is for family. I'm driving home. I'm going to have dinner with my family. I mean, that was it. And, Wade is a pretty devout, very devout, and he liked nothing on Wednesday nights. And, nothing on Sunday mornings or Sunday afternoons. And he was always an inspiration. And you're right. I mean, things will never be the same. And I've been in a number of band halls lately. And although everybody just seems a little bit stunned, everybody just seems a little bit on the ropes, but still fighting, especially teachers. It is just really moving to see all the posts about kids being able to assemble and play at UIL and at least maybe they're playing down a list, but down a grade level, but they're still able to come together and make music. And we should never take that for granted. You don't realize how important it is until it's taken away. And so you're right. Now we're maybe able to stop and smell the roses a little bit and have a greater appreciation for what we do have, because it's fragile.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing too, talking about the legacy that you've created, not only for all of your, kind of adopted kids, but like Sean and Clay, excellent, just the highest class of musicians. And so I'm curious, whenever they were young, you kind of touched on this already, of just kind of like balancing that family life, but did you ever feel like they kind of went into music because it was like the family business, and then they found out that they were like, oh, we have a natural knack for this, whether it's in the blood or just like nature, nurture, whatever, and then wanted to really dive after it? Or was it from the very start just this kind of, initial attraction to the drum set to just rock out or whatever, and then it turned into trombone or trumpet or what have you?
Well, I think you and I share in that our parents, your mom is a great musician, and I know there was music in your house when you were growing up, and so I was the same way. Our boys were just immersed in music. They came to just untold number of concerts and rehearsals and half times and parades, and I mean they were just it was just a way of life for us. So on the contrary, we never pushed them into music. We made sure that they did what they wanted to do, and they just both had a love for it and ended up pursuing it. And Clay had to kind of reroute and go a different direction, but Sean's making a living at it, which is pretty hard to do. I'm not sure how many bass trombone players are making a living playing big band jazz, but
sure,
just a handful. And so we were really careful not to ever push our kids into music, and we wanted them to just pave their own path. And but thank you for the compliments. We're proud of both of them, and and I think even if someone pursues music at the outset, you're all the while you're really just putting your brain on superpower, hook up, and you're developing a skill that you can use the rest of your life, even if you decide to make your primary occupation something completely different.
Yeah, I think another thing too, just like to continue with the compliments, is just the kind of people that Clay and Sean are. Just meeting Clay for the first time, of course, like not for the first time, but what I consider to be, one of the first like intentional times of just being a freshman, and coming in, and just he exhibited in the perfect way that you'd want like an ambassador to not to make a joke there about Sean, ambassador, but like an ambassador of the Brazoswood Band and the inclusive and inviting nature of it. I mean, I was so intimidated because he's like, was the screamer of the trumpet section and was just this amazing trumpet player. And yet he was also the nicest guy. And I was, small, little awkward, always like thinking I was going to say a funny joke and then like comedy fall flat thing, and yet he just welcomed in everybody with all of their awkward quirks, or if they were like the cool guy, like he treated them all the exact same. And then, by the same token, Sean, I remember him walking into a AM or PM jazz rehearsal once, and we all just kind of like stopped because we were like, that's Sean Casey. That's Sean Casey. And then just like whenever, and then I remember getting a friend request from him on Facebook, and I must have done laps around, the house, because I was like, oh my God, like it's Sean Casey, and just all the things that he was doing at the time. And then him being in the Ambassadors and really kind of saying some things that hit me a lot about whenever I made my second record and sent it to him and got his thoughts on it. Some of the things that he said, all constructive but challenging at the same time, really shaped the way that I approach the craft now. So not only in a musical sense, but in just like a upstanding human being sense. You've instilled that legacy, not only in us, like musicians that have come through, but in your own kids as well. It's so inspiring to see, and I don't think anyone could have any bad thing to say about the entire Casey family for 150,000 miles, whatever.
It's really nice of you to say, Christian, but I'm going to give my wife most of the credit on that. After their mom more than their dad, I think. But that's really nice, and it's nice. I hadn't heard the story about Sean, commenting on your second record. I didn't know he did that, but anyway, it's funny because Sean doesn't have any interest in teaching. He just loves to play, and but I'm glad he was able to help you.
Yeah, he sent me a Gerald Clayton record, which is called oh boy, it's the one where I think he's standing in front of the Metropolitan. I can't remember exactly what record it's called, but it has When an Angel Sheds a Feather on it, on one of the last tunes, and it has this vocalist who I'm probably going to butcher the pronunciation, but I believe it's Sakal Vasandani, and just really amazing. And he was like, yeah, listen to the inflection of his voice, listen to how easy it comes out. Like the tune that most resembles that is My Funny Valentine. Really start to tap into that and like really focus on that as you're going forward. And it just like blew up my world, and but in a good way. Anyways, enough about me. I'm not the guest here. Moving on, I got a couple more things I wanted to ask you about, and then I'll let you go because I want to be respectful of your time. Is TMEA Honor Band 2013. I mean, something that I think as of late, a lot of people who were involved have, either just like made comments on Facebook as like the memory like pulls it back up, like in February and things like that. But Lydia and I were watching a movie last night called Battle of the Sexes with Emma Stone and Steve Carell, which is about the match between Bobby Riggs and Billie Jean King. And this isn't an exact analogy, but it was the whole thing of where he was a little bit of a chauvinist, or not a little bit, he was a chauvinist, and she was doing like the male versus female match to kind of like prove a point and fight for women's equality in tennis. And there's a moment, again, it's not an exact analogy, but there's a moment, spoiler alert, after she wins, and she goes, instead of going straight into an interview, she's like, give me a minute, and she goes into the locker room and has like a very like kind of quiet, vulnerable moment, and is crying not only because of personal achievement and defying the odds, but also realizing the impact and the degree of impact that it has beyond herself and for women everywhere. For the third time, it's not a direct analogy, but the idea of winning that honor band. Whenever you first found out, did you have a moment, or I won't even pigeonhole it like that, like what was it like finding out the news, that first initial moment, and then also the night after, or the night of the performance following that, when you get to like let your head hit the pillow and you're kind of alone with your thoughts. How did you feel both personally and also for the greater scope of how that affects not only the legacy of Brazoswood, but the lives of every kid in that band, both who made the tape and also the kids who actually made performed the show?
I was always, I was proud that Jim Cook and I, we always really worked hard not to focus on the winning part of things, but just the excellence part of things. And so I remember we worked really hard on Jaya Ball and Symphony No. 2, the Kelly, and we worked really hard on that music and got it up to a really high level. And I never thought in 1,000 years we would win. And especially our last performance was at the Clarion, and you and your fellow seniors were kind of a little late and unfocused coming into the last performance. It was senior picnic day, I think, and everybody was just like, it was a beautiful day outside. And here came the seniors, kind of just bebopping into the clarion, and it wasn't as focused as I wanted it to be. And I remember, just conducting that concert saying, well, this is a throwaway. We're not going to get a good recording here. Mm-hmm. There weren't many people in the audience. It was just kind of, I just thought, this is the end of this preparation period, and this is the last performance with these seniors. And, I just kind of let go and just kind of just disengaged and just conducted through the rest of it. And I wasn't even going to consider that performance for the recording. And Ryan Limbaugh came back to me and said, "Hey, that was awesome." And I said, "What are you talking about?" And what I learned from that was that the perspective on the stage and off the stage are sometimes completely different. I think there have been times when I thought I really nailed something, and I'll go back and listen to the recording, and I was wrong. And so in that case, I thought it didn't go particularly well. I think Jenna Butcher, now McKay, was one of the best. She was maybe the best piccolo player in the history of the school, but she missed this little two-note. She just didn't play this little two-note thing. It had never happened before, and I'll never forget that. I thought, and she was just the most conscientious person. She felt so bad, but it ended up not having a bearing on, an effect on anything. But there were just like a few of those little things. And my brain went immediately to those little imperfections and not to all the beautiful, in tune, fantastic playing that Jenna did that night. I was too focused on just those two notes, and I was focused on all the things that weren't going well, like the seniors were late and they weren't focused, and things were too rowdy, and I couldn't. Anyway. So that was a huge learning experience for me, even 20 something years into the activity. So I listened to every band in the room that day at Honor Band at TBA, and I just thought I'd be happy. I'm happy to be here, just to be in the room and be in the conversation. There were so many great programs, and my goodness, Bergner and Marcus, and just all these programs that I'd always respected. And so I was standing out in the hallway, and I remember like a couple of guys came and said, "Hey, come with us." And I thought, "What's going on? Am I in trouble or whatever?" And they led me through this group of people, and they were all looking at me. And I looked at the list, and the first thing I looked up and said, "Recalculate it." There's no way. But anyway, I think all the blood like drained from my face, and the first thing I thought about was, all these seniors just graduated. I've got to come back and put a band together and play a concert, prepare it during marching season and prepare it in February. So it was daunting to prepare a marching program and a concert program at the same time. Yeah. But fortunately I had Martin Montoya on board, and, Martin really took reins of the marching band, and it ended up being a great marching season too. But it was a lot of hard work, and, definitely there was a lot of love in the theater that night when we performed, and it was so great that so many seniors got to come back and be under the roof and share the love with us. And the head hit the pillow. Yes, Christian, the head hit the pillow the night after. The night before, I assure you, there was no sleep at all.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think even just thinking back as you were saying that, I am getting a little emotional and fighting back tears a little bit, because I remember there was a specific moment where we were sound checking in the Lila, or no, we weren't even sound checking. We just walked in. I believe you told Zieping to bring his saxophone, and we were just standing on stage. And you were like, "Guys, just take this in," and you asked, I believe it was Zieping, to play the solo from Sleep My Child and just let it reverberate in the room. And you were like, "Remember this moment, because this is special." And lots of people don't get to have moments like this in their lives, doing something with a group of people. And after tomorrow, we'll never be able to have that moment again all together, playing this music with every single person. Even if we did some kind of reunion concert, it likely would not have every single person in the same kind of way. And I think when the intentionality of an educator brings that to your view brings that to mind and says like, hey, look, this is really special. Like, stop for a minute. Just like stop thinking about like what shenanigans you're going to get to at whatever unnamed restaurant on the Riverwalk that you're hoping that a band director won't walk by and see you in, whatever. Just focus on this moment. And it did. I think if you told people about that, they'd go, yeah, absolutely. I remember that very vividly. And so, yeah, I don't know where I was going with that necessarily, but I just want to say thank you again for the upteenth time. And it's not the first time, it's not the last time that I'm going to thank you for all that you've done, but that just was, what a special experience, man. And I can't think of an educator I would rather have spent that experience with.
Oh, thank you, Christian. My during all that crazy honor band preparation stuff, my wife wrote out just on a little piece of paper. I've still got it above my bathroom sink, but it says "enjoy the moments." And my personality type, I really had to remind myself of that. So that was as much selfish as anything at that moment, and I remember it. It makes me emotional too, because we were blessed with the opportunity to kind of sit on stage and acclimate a little bit the night before. And we had just been going, 100 miles an hour, but just to sit there and just soak in the atmosphere and look out into the seats where, in 24 hours, there would be every seat filled. But just, I remember that, having Z-Ping play that beautiful melody, and just to realize that, we did have that opportunity. It was an opportunity to enjoy the moment and to just not be under the gun of a performance, but just kind of savor each other's company and kind of reflect on what we had gone through and what it had taken to get to there. And as I recall, we had a few different players, just even like cymbals, just to kind of get a feel for the room and just to kind of make sure we were going to be able to make it our own. So thank you for reminding me of that moment. That was very cool, and to share it with so many special people. And I would like to add that three couples ended up tying the knot out of that band. So 10% of the band is married. So that's,
cool. Who is it? It's Natty and Jenna. Who else are the members of the band?
Alden and Callie.
Yeah, because I stood in that wedding.
You're in trouble now.
I am. Yeah. I'll leave it in.
And then, I've been seeing Robert and Jenny walking around the neighborhood, with Jenny's little boy lately too. So I think they may be a thing as well. So anyway, that's pretty cool. It was a real special time, and again, it was. I never thought that we'd be there. It was a gift from our Lord above, and the whole thing was just a gift. And I hope we did it justice. Yeah.
Well, I think we did, or at least as good as we could, and that's all that's all we can hope for. But man, to ask you the two final questions of every episode is one, if there is a record or two or three, and it doesn't have to be jazz, it can be literally anything you want, that you would suggest to people as soon as this is over, be like, go check this out, this is absolutely the record to be listening to today, what would you suggest?
Wow. I think the Chick Corea Friends album, the one with the Smurfs, I just think to me there was just no tighter musical chemistry and just musical, the psychic bond between those players, and just the way Steve Gadd just masterfully tied it all together. And I just think the compositions are genius, but just I'm not sure there's ever been a more. It just sounds like it's coming out of one brain. So I go back and I must have listened to that album more than any, but I go back every once in a while, and it's funny, you can listen to something that you haven't listened to for a while, and maybe even on a little bit higher plane than last time, and just hear different things or hear things in different ways. So I guess if you're going to hold a gun to my head and ask me for one, that's the one.
Fantastic. Amazing. And then the last question, and this is my favorite. I'm so excited to hear your your answer on this. I'm not sure if you know what's coming, but the last question of the show is, we all have gigs from hell where things go totally up the wall. Can you think of a particular gig, or it could be contest, or it could be, whatever, where you were just like, what is going on? Could be a band trip even. Those are full of fun stories. But what sticks out as a gig, band trip, contest from hell?
No question, and it's all in one. We had an out-of-town football game on Friday night. We drug in at, I don't know what time. Went to area marching contest in spring and at the stadium there, and it was like the big reflector oven, the aluminum seats, and we sat there and just baked all day. It was one of those 4 a.m, get there and do run through and have the cops show up, and like we didn't have lights on our field, so the kids had to park around the field and turn their headlights on.
Oh my gosh.
So Jim and I were totally exhausted, and we were both playing with the Buddy Brock Orchestra at the time, and so we did not make finals at area. But back then it was a one and done, like you performed at 2 p.m. and then you just waited for you. There wasn't a final, so.
Sure.
Yeah, performed in the afternoon after sweating all day, dehydrated, exhausted. We drove to Best Dad's house. We showered. We put on our tuxes, drove downtown Houston, and started what is a 8-hour gig with the Houston Consular Ball. And it was nonstop music. So I started the first hour with an acoustic bass, just walking around. Brian Grinquist was playing accordion, and there was a violinist, I think, and so we wandered around and did that for an hour, strolling strings kind of thing. And then we took the bandstand, and there was like a little string section along with the Buddy Brock band. And it was this huge consular ball. I think it was Ecuador that year. And just people as far as you can see, security and huge setup and everything. And so, but the thing was, it was continuous music. So, whenever you had a break, I would holler over to Richard Burke. He was playing lead trombone, and he would come over and play bass. And I would get a chance to go try to pull it together. But I started seeing things like the dots at some point, like about 11 p.m. I started like the dots started running together on the page. Anyway, so I would take a break and go back to the back and drink coffee and eat chocolate. I hate chocolate. I've always hated chocolate. My dad was allergic to chocolate, but just for survival, just for blood sugar and just to try to maintain consciousness, I would just go to the back and just and so then my stomach started getting upset. Anyway, I felt terrible, and I was trying to read all these charts, and it was the pressure was on to sound great, and so I was in minute to minute, just survival mode, just trying to stay conscious, much less read music with these high level players. So that was my gig from hell. It was just the most, it was an endurance. It was a stamina challenge, but anyway, we got to the end, and I think, as I remember, Jim and I had to take turns driving home, by the 15-minute increment, just to stay between the lines. But anyway, that one's there were a few interesting ones through the years, but that's the one.
Hallucinations take the cake. For sure. I've had a few of those where it's like, nope, I'm pulling over in this Whataburger parking lot and I'm taking a nap for 5 hours because I just cannot make it home. Seeing things is definitely the marker of all right, it's time for sleep. So very good. Well, Mr. Casey, I cannot thank you enough, A, for being here, B, for being, just one of the top 5, if not top 3, if not number 1 most influential people in my life. I love you dearly. I cannot, sing your praises loud enough. And it's truly special and really an honor to any time to share any amount of time with you. So thank you so much for coming on.
Christian, thank you. And it's students like you that made the job worthwhile. It's students like you that made us just want to go to work every day. So I'm glad we're still in touch, and I'm honored to be a part of this. And I've enjoyed all your episodes so far. Keep it going, would you?
Oh, of course, man. We got big plans for episode 50 and onward. So it will stay going.
Awesome. Well, looking forward to following your your future, and thanks again for having me.
Of course. Thanks, man. Talk to you soon. Peace.
All right. Absolutely.
Bye.
Peace.